The question is, why do we study leadership? And one does not have to go very far or very long to see or hear about another leadership crisis, or another moral failing, or another lapse in judgment by our leaders. Whether in the public sector, whether in the private sector, the leadership crisis is everywhere. Most recently, on the news was the crisis in leadership with the Secret Service. And what's very compelling about this, or sobering about this, is that these are the elite of the elite. The elite of the elite are having a problem with leadership. So this was the headlines in September 29th, September 29th, crisis in leadership. Then in December, a report came out investigating the crisis in leadership. And this is what they say: panel finds Secret Service leadership lacking, and then the report finds Secret Service is starved for leadership. I'm going to suggest that there's a crisis in leadership and people are starved and looking and wanting capable and competent leaders. So why study leadership? Well, one aspect, I'm going to suggest that if the only tool we have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If our leadership repertoire is limited to one frame of reference or one perspective, then our leadership is going to be limited accordingly. So the goal here is to expand our tool belt and develop different facets about what it takes to lead complex organizations. Here's a quote from an article on public administration, but it says, today's public sector leaders certainly must have more than one leadership style and possess a multitude of tools in their toolboxes. And so that's why we study leadership. That's one reason we study leadership. Another reason is that there is a crisis in leadership in terms of the confidence level. There is a below average confidence level in our leaders across the board. And this comes from the Center of Public Leadership at Harvard University. They've been doing the survey since 2005. Now what's interesting, you'll notice that military and medical, we still have above average confidence in our leaders in those fields. But once you go down the list, you see we have below average confidence. That doesn't bode well when we do not have confidence in our leaders. In this survey, do we have a leadership crisis? 69% agree and strongly disagree. Unless we get better leaders, the United States will decline as a nation. Up to 70% agree and strongly disagree. So this is why we study leadership. Overall, our country's leaders are effective and do a good job. 68% of us strongly disagree or disagree. Here's another statistics from that report. America remains, let me read the question. Would you say that the problems we face today can be solved through effective leadership, or that they cannot be solved no matter what who our leaders are? The good news is people are optimistic. The right leaders can make a difference. So why do we study leadership? Because we know we need leaders, and leaders can make a difference. So not only is there a lack of confidence in our leaders, giving a sense of a leadership crisis, there's actually deficits in what our leaders have. A report from the Center for Creative Leadership, leaders are not adequately prepared for the future, and they label it the leadership deficit, that there's actually a deficit when people emerge into leadership roles. So there's not, and this is a report from IBM. They interviewed all these CEOs, and this is a sobering, these are CEOs of the top Fortune 500 companies. Today's complexity is only expected to rise, and more than half of the CEOs doubt their ability to manage it. So even these leaders are not necessarily prepared for what it takes to lead in the near future. So not only is there a lack of confidence in leaders, there's a deficit in leadership skills, there's just a lot of bad leaders also, which heighten the crisis. So these are some of this, I'm going to share a series of quotes that paints the picture of how bad it is in terms of when it comes to the leadership crisis and dealing with bad leaders. We all know, based upon our own experience, that bad leaders are ubiquitous. We don't have to, again, go very far to learn about that. Less than half of all leaders instill trust in their subordinates, less than half. 2 out of 5 bosses lack leadership skills. More than a third complain that their bosses did not give credit where credit was due. And then this next quote is very, very kind of sad to think that this could happen. Just under 1/3 of the subordinates report that in the last year they were subjected by their superiors to the silent treatment. That happens in the playground. Shouldn't happen in the boardroom. In addition, 75% of working adults report that the most stressful aspect of their job is their immediate boss. So that doesn't bode well, and it suggests that there really is a crisis in leadership. Not just lack of confidence, not just a lack of deficit, just having leadership deficits, but just having bad leaders. Another reason there's a crisis in leadership, I'm going to suggest, is that there's a low appeal to leadership. And there's several reasons for that. First of all, we can be perceived as presumptuous to say, oh, I'm the leader of the group. No, really good leaders don't walk around promoting and advertising that they're the leader of the group. So we shy away from leadership positions just because it can be perceived as presumptuous. We also shy away from leadership because there's the myth of leadership. We think our leaders should be perfect. We all have implicit theories of leadership, and in that implicit theory, we grow up in having these high expectations for leaders. And we think they should walk on water or have an S on with their cape. Those are the expectations. So it's foreboding to even step in the leadership role because of that. Many of us don't assume a leadership role also because we lack a formal title. I'm going to suggest that actually the informal leader can carry more weight, have a disproportionate influence than the formal leader of any organization. But because we lack a formal title, we sometimes shy away from leadership. The other reason we shy away, let's face it, leadership's filled with a lot of headaches, heartaches, and hardships. It is hard to take a leadership role, whether a formal leadership role or an informal leadership role. I love this quote from a former chancellor at the University of California system. Friends come and go, but enemies accrue. And in leadership, you make decisions, eventually you're going to alienate or offend certain people. So it's tough to be a leader. And that's the challenge of why we study leadership. So I'm going to suggest that leadership matters. We know that. We see when good leaders exist, good things happen. When bad leaders are in place, not so good things happen. The other good news, though, is that education can make a difference. Exemplary leadership can be developed. It can be taught. That's in the research. But I want to end with a quote by JFK that's on the day of his assassination. He was in Dallas to deliver a speech to civic and business leaders. And it's called the unspoken speech. And in that speech, he had the statement that education and leadership, are indispensable to one another. And so education and leadership go hand in hand. So why do we study leadership? Because we believe education can enhance leadership, can help develop ethical and exemplary leaders. With that in mind, here at CBU, we've developed graduate programs in leadership studies, and those are just a sample of the leadership study programs that we do have. We also have leadership programs at the undergraduate level. So that's why we invite you to study leadership. Thank you.